All right, atypical episode number 2 begins now. All right, let's do it. How are you? Obviously, I am not live. Once again, I'm doing the same thing I was last week. I have traveled to the nearest city-state to get Owen Jr. scanned up. They told me it had to happen on Tuesday, and I said the people are going to be waiting for me. But I guess that's what fatherhood is all about in the beginning, and probably for the whole time, actually. So if you didn't watch last week's episode, you probably want to. Normally they don't stack on each other, 1, 2. I guess this one could function on its own, but they kind of go together. In case you weren't there last week or we just need a little recap, I thought I'd take a chance to use the pre-recorded episodes to do something a little bit different. We've been talking about intro to drawing for a very long time, and this is happening elsewhere in my creative life right now, so it's a perennial principle, but sometimes you imagine a project to be so infinitely big. You imagine the whole city with the roads and the aqueducts and the buildings and the castle and the cathedrals that laying the first brick starts to feel impossible, and then you just never do it. That happens a lot, actually, especially in the visual arts. So here in the show, I thought, well, intro to drawing, that really is such a big topic. Why not just kind of wade into it and see what happens? And that's what we're doing here. So last week we hit sketchbook, drawing the things around you, perfect first step. And I was thinking, what's the second step? I was thinking about all the different drawing principles that exist. Form, I thought maybe how to like render things like hatching, lines, shading and stuff. But then I thought, I don't know, is that a little bit, maybe that's step 3 or 4? And I couldn't pin down exactly what the first step would be. And then I thought, boom, something that is applicable to every image making situation ever, sketching, making a final image, painting, watercolor, calligraphy, drawing, anything, doesn't really matter, is composition. So I am timing myself right here because I'm about to head up and go to the nearest city-state. But I want to take maybe 40 minutes or so, 45 minutes or so, and do a total intro, not total, we'll see how far we get, intro to basic composition stuff. And the thing is, I guess we should define what composition is. It's how we arrange the elements of a picture. We'll talk about that in a second. You really could write a whole book, multiple books, volumes, encyclopedias on compositional theory and theories of image making and how things should be laid out in an image. So I wanted to focus on a few things that you can actually just grab onto and take with you straight away that don't require you to digest a whole book's worth of information. And on the flip side, normally those things that get very, very, very theoretical, then they kind of just sit in the back of your mind and you often don't really use them. That's not a bad thing. Sometimes it's good to load up the back of your mind with theory and more advanced things so it kind of percolates up into the front of your mind, or maybe you deploy it in specific situations. But for now, I wanted to focus on a few things that you could just take away instantly from the show right now, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about what this is near the end of the show. I have this cool tool here. It's a little bit tarnished because I've had it for so long, but I think that adds a nice element of mystique to it. What is it? Do you know? Do you know what it is? If you've been reading every single post I've made on Twitter for the last 5 years, you might know what it is. But if you don't, we'll get to it in a second. Don't worry. But first off, let's just do it. Let's just keep it going. So let's see how far we can get in about 40 to 45 minutes. What is composition? Well, people ask me, Owen, I was doing some art. Can you check it out? They DM me. Yes, of course. I want to check it out. And I normally, you can do that, by the way. I'm kind of busy, but I do want to see what you're working on. Pretty much always hit people that are new into art or getting their game going again or just starting out with one of the same principles, one of the same concepts. People send me a drawing and they say, oh, and check it out, I drew a rabbit. Look, I drew him. He's got the ears. I got the back. He's got the part in the front. He's got the tail. He's got an eye, and he's all fuzzy. What do you think of my rabbit? And I say, wow, it's really great. But here's the thing. This is not a composed image. This is just floating in the white ether. It's just a drawing of a rabbit. It's not a composed image of a rabbit. What do I mean by that? Well, I often advise people to draw into a frame. And that's because now if you're drawing into this frame and you want to draw a rabbit in here, now you are forced to compose the image, i.e. think about how you are arranging the image. So if this is our frame, I don't know, what should we do? Maybe we'll draw the rabbit down here at the bottom. So we're forced to make a decision about how the image is composed. So we got the rabbit down here, and then we say, okay, well now I have all this other empty space. Maybe he's in a field. Maybe we got a tree over here or something. Okay, boom, and now we've composed and arranged the image in a certain way. By working into a frame, any of the picture elements that you put in, you're forced to decide where they go, and that affects how the image is read. For example, let's say we're going to put in a sun. Well, where do we put it? If we put it at the top center, that's going to have a certain vibe. I kind of like it, actually. But maybe we put it over here. That's going to have a totally different vibe. Maybe we make it rising over here. Whatever it is, by forcing ourselves to work into a frame, we're forcing ourselves to compose an actual image as opposed to just drawing into the abyss. In case that's not really intuitive to you, let's say we have a frame right here. You could do it totally differently. Maybe your rabbit now, whoa, now we're doing something like this, and he is all the way up in the front. That's a totally different image. Now you can see the fur. That's actually a pretty cool composition. Maybe we're going to do it this way. Maybe you just want maybe the rabbit's up here at the top of the picture. Boom. And then we have all this. Maybe this is just shaded in as grass. That would be kind of a cool picture. Or maybe you say, well, you know, I've heard Owen use the term picture plane, the picture frame as a window. Maybe I don't want to do that. So maybe I am just going to put the rabbit dead center here. This guy looks kind of sad. Just a sad rabbit. And maybe this is not a window into a scene and everything. Maybe it's just, some kind of geometric thing. So maybe I'll put the rabbit in a circle. And then I've been looking at a lot of church architecture. Maybe I'll put in these shapes around the outside. And that's how my rabbit drawing is going to go. That looks pretty cool, actually. So whatever it is, you can see that this is a totally different world than this over here. By just drawing onto the page, happens all the time. People are like, hey, look, I drew an apple. What do you think? I say, that's really cool, but it's much better if you force yourself to compose a picture of an apple, right? You can see it's a world of a difference over here. So this is not composed, and now we've composed these images. Perfect. Now we understand what composition is. And also, this is a little bit more than we're going to cover right now, but just so you know, the areas of light and dark in a picture are also part of the composition. So even if you just kind of blur your eyes, maybe you just kind of squint at the screen right now, that's a trick for blurring your eyes and stuff. The way the light and dark is arranged in the frame, that's also part of the composition. So maybe you're in Colorado or something and you have some hill in the background. This is like the light hill. So now if you just squint your eyes a little bit and look at this, the way the light and the dark is arranged is part of the image composition. Maybe you toned this down. Maybe the sky, it's a gray day. And then the rabbit is the white part kind of singing out of the picture. So we're going to be talking mostly about lines and just simply arranging things, but just so you know, the way, I'm repeating myself because it's a basic principle you have to remember, the way the light and the dark is arranged is also part of the composition. So it's two different aspects of it you can think about. Anyway, one thing that's pretty simple, so we're going to build up to something that might be a little bit too complicated to cover in one episode. So I wanted to hit a few simple things you can take away. And one of the main things, you've probably never noticed this about the way you read images before. Maybe you have subconsciously, but once you realize it, you'll notice it for pretty much every image you look at for the rest of your life. So sorry if I'm about to ruin that experience for you. But you read an image, right? We say that, but it's not just a coincidence of language. You do read an image. And when you read texts, assuming you understand English and you're not just here for the lovely sound of my voice and the pictures and you have no idea what I've been saying for a year or two, assuming you read English stuff sometimes. When you read text on a page, you read it this way, obviously. Left to right and going down. So that actually is also how your eye reads an image. When you look at an image, whether you realize it or not, your eye starts up here, it goes over here, it comes down here, and then it comes over here. And I like to put a period here because this feels like the end of the image. So if you just look at this rectangle, you can feel it's a very natural way for you to read this rectangle. You can kind of just feel your eye walking along, right? That's how you read an image. And I really internalized that principle when I started going really hard into Japanese painting. Like we talk about sometimes with theological stuff, looking at something that's different than how you see things illuminates aspects of your own situation. You compare yourself to other things naturally. In Japan, I'm pretty sure, someone could correct me on this, but they write top down, going left to right. So if you're reading Japanese stuff, you're going down, over, down, over, down, over. And that's how, if you were a part of that culture, you would supposedly naturally read an image. 1, 2, then you're going to come up here, 3, 4. So it's kind of interesting because this is still the end over here in the bottom right corner, but you're going in a little bit of a different order. If you were doing a really, really academic study of Japanese scroll painting, or you were just going into it really hard for your own purposes, that's something that you'd probably want to keep in mind or just keep in the back of your mind. So you can kind of feel that when we make an image. Let's just say we're going to draw a guy. Let's say we're going to draw a guy at the beach. So we got the sun up here. We got the lovely M birds. Everyone loves the M birds. There's a flock of them in the sky, I guess. And we draw this is the water now over here. And the guy's on the beach over here. If we put the guy down over here and just leave it like that, you can kind of feel your eye sort of ends up over here and there's nothing over here, right? It's just the end of the image. Not that it looks bad or anything, but you can feel, I'm going to stop taking my pen here in a second, but you can feel your eye go, okay, and it kind of just feels like there's nothing at the end of the image. It's worth noting because, you know, if we lived in a totally arbitrary visual universe, there's no reason why the bottom right should be the end of the image, but it kind of does function that way. And you'll see here if we have something to compare it to. Let's take this frame over here. So let's say we have the same picture. We got the M-shaped birds. They're seagulls. Everyone loves them. Someone told me recently seagulls can live to be like 30 years old, and I'm kind of still like internalizing it. Boom. And now if we put the guy down here, maybe we need a little something to balance it out, a little boat in the distance maybe. But you can kind of feel that, I don't want to say it's more natural, but now the guy is at the end of the image. Your eye goes, boom, and he's at the end. Maybe if we made this a real picture, we want to put some texture down over here, something like that. But the point is that it feels like he's at the end of the image as opposed to him being over here. And something you'll notice actually is these principles are used a lot in every visual thing from graphic design to advertising. I guess advertising is a form of graphic design. What you'll often notice is that if you were to see something like this in a magazine, this image right over here, you could see something like this actually. And what would be over here is the logo for whatever company or thing that is being advertised. Make it on fire. It's a kind of cool company, I guess. Because now you can see it's like, oh, here's the story, boom, that's the brand. And you'll often see in ads, if you look, that the final punch of like, yeah, it's Coca-Cola, or boom, whatever the ending note is, which would usually be the logo in an advertisement, kind of like a commercial, right? They end with the big screen of the logo, will be in the bottom right over here. So just a visual note, here the end is this thing, here the end is this thing. And when you're planning on arranging an image, we'll probably do a few examples of that in a second, you do want to think about how the image ends, what's like the final note in the image. Oftentimes a composition I've used is, let's say, I don't know if we should go into this yet, but I'm kind of just winging it a little bit. Let's say we have a girl. I use this composition all the time because I really like it. We have a girl, and then maybe she has like a big dress or something. And then let's say she has her hand over here, and then, I don't know, maybe there's like a cat or something in the corner. I don't actually do that a lot. But you can see here, let's say maybe she's like a saint or something with a cat. You can see here, same deal. Come down, and then the ending is this thing over here. You kind of want to have a nice like note for the image to end on. It's actually a really good composition. Anyway, so from that we can jump off and illustrate a few other principles. I'm just going to quickly put that on the page again so we all remember. 1, 2, 3, 4. So one basic thing here, what that means for us if we're composing an image, is that in this visual cultural context, is that this line coming down from the top right to the bottom left is the natural diagonal. It's just the natural diagonal that we can utilize while image making. So I even did it naturally a second ago without realizing it because it's so natural to me. But when we made the image of the guy at the beach, I kind of naturally put in the birds on this diagonal, right? Because it just kind of feels natural, just kind of feels normal to have the diagonal in the image going that way. You can feel your eye kind of coming down, and again, maybe we have a little boat or something. We need something over there to just balance it out a little bit. Maybe it's a sandcastle. But you can feel your eye naturally, boom, goes along there, and it just feels kind of natural and normal. Sometimes, let's say we were doing like a more fine art style painting. Let's say we had similar thing, but maybe we got inspired by Japanese art. We have this big branch coming through the front of the picture, coming down, little blossoms on the branch. Maybe there's a bird in the tree over here. Great bird, look at that guy. Coming down, and then maybe we have a little tree in the distance or something. So you can feel, again, get some leaves up in here just to really drive it home. It's a good composition, actually. This is the natural diagonal coming down this way. The opposite of this, just for a comparison, actually, I'm going to quickly draw this the other way. Bring it down a little bit more than I thought I would. Let's just see what it looks like the other way. So when you have the diagonal coming the other way, I'm trying as hard as possible to make it the same visual texture, so we're really comparing apples to apples. Perfect. And I guess we would put the tree over here. Cool. So we have this versus this. Let's look one more time. We have this versus this. And it's not wrong to do it this way, but you should just be aware that there is a visual tide. There's a natural way the water's flowing, let's say, and if you choose to work against it or choose to work with it, that should just be a conscious decision that you're making. This diagonal that I'm about to draw in right now doesn't have to go that way. It could go either way, I guess. But this diagonal is what we call a struggle diagonal. That's actually a design principle, is the struggle diagonal, because you're going against the natural visual flow. So same deal, let's see what it looks like with our beach drawing over here. So we get the birds, and the flock of birds is going to be going the other way. So again, it's not wrong or something. It's not like you would look at a picture and say, oh, wow, that guy put the diagonal the wrong way. It's just a visual principle that you should be aware of. And if you were in like a design class or something, let's see, we need a little sandcastle or something over here. That is something people would say. They would say, wow, I like how you use the struggle diagonal there. You know, there's a term people actually use. So you kind of feel this goes against the natural way the image flows. And you can use that to your advantage. For example, sometimes whenever I think of a good application of the struggle diagonal, since it feels like it kind of adds some like tension to the image, in my opinion, I might use it if I was doing an image, let's say, of a guy, maybe it's a saint, and let's say he's loaded up. I kind of want the spear to be a little bit higher, so just pretend I drew the arms holding the spear correctly. And maybe it's like a kind of intense image, it's an intense moment in some battle or something, let's say. And this guy, boom, he's killing this like evil guy. Oh my god, I'm freaking dead. What? I died. I hate that. Okay, so this diagonal, let's say we gotta balance it out a little bit. Perfect. Adds more tension because it's going against the natural flow of the image. And in fact, just to compare, Let's see what it would be like if we composed it the other way. Obviously, these are really simple drawings, but that are kind of sloppy, but that kind of actually lets us see the composition even more because we're not distracted by the other visual elements. Perfect. So you can see one's not wrong, one's not right, but it's a just totally different way of composing the image. This one feels more natural, actually. I kind of like that one a little bit more. Yeah, if I was drawing this, I would probably draw it this way, honestly. Maybe we could, get some other stuff in here in the background or something, and that would kind of like balance it out a little bit. And if you're planning out a composition, you can just like put in stuff like this because what you're feeling is how your eye moves around the image. So it kind of balances out a little bit if we get a little bit of that going on in here. Cool, so struggle diagonal. And the other thing I wanted to cover based on this one before we move on to the next thing is that this is getting totally subjective now to my own subjective standards and views. But for me, I think because of this principle, the eye actually enters the image right here. So your eye comes in and enters the image this way, and I like to leave some space here so the eye can enter the image. You can see I even kind of intuitively did it up here. I wouldn't load up this part of the image with like a ton of stuff. And if I did, I would want to use that stuff as a natural walk in to the image. So again, with compositional principles, it's not like this is wrong and this is right. It's more like you want to know what you're working with so you can consciously make decisions, basically. So based on that, maybe you would have something over here. Maybe you have like a little branch that just kind of leads the eye into the image. And then maybe you have some other stuff. And then here's the guy. He's like, well, I'm thinking about my life. That's crazy. And then you have, let's say, a river, and that's how the image ends. It's kind of a good composition, too. But same deal. You just want to know what you're working with. And in my opinion, you can kind of feel the eye enter the image this way. I think mostly, probably the best illustration of that is if you do a portrait of someone, it kind of feels weird. Of course, you wouldn't do it this way. Well, actually, I'm going to get a new piece of paper. It kind of feels a little bit weird to have their face too close up against the top portion of the frame. I think that would probably be the best illustration of that. Of course, this is kind of a strange composition in and of itself. But just as an extreme example, I think it kind of feels weird to have their face too close over here because it's like you can almost feel your eye walk in and be like, whoa, boom. It's like right there. There's no room to breathe almost. It's like, whoa. And you can kind of feel it's a little bit more natural. Let's kind of put the extreme in the other direction. Let's put them all the way over here. And just to make it a cohesive image, maybe we have a mountain or something in the sun over here, maybe some clouds. You kind of feel way more natural in my opinion. Your eye comes in and you have some room and then you get started with the picture. Let's be fair and put some other pictorial elements over here. So you can kind of feel there's a pretty extreme difference in my opinion, and I think that that's because your eye enters the image over here and has room to come in. And in fact, this could be a good composition. We could even make them like a saint or something. That'd be kind of cool. It's kind of a cool layout, actually. This one, I think it just kind of is uncomfortable. Maybe if you're making an image that was meant to be uncomfortable or something, you could intentionally utilize that, but it's just something you want to be aware of. And likewise, I think that where I drew the 4 down over here and put the period, you kind of do want a stopping point here because maybe for a certain image you would want this, maybe for a certain image you wouldn't. But in general, I think you do want the eye to come around and say, okay, cool. I kind of think of it like water and the eye is like pooling up and has like a nice little container to stop in. Sometimes if you look at an image, you can kind of feel that your eye just kind of like wanders out of it. So that's just another thing you want to keep in mind. And as you look at images from maybe different cultures, maybe your own culture, wherever you're trying to grab stuff from, everyone does things a little bit differently. For example, in Japan, again, one principle I picked up from them, I'd recommend anyone look at like Japanese woodblock prints, is that they often have this dark area up at the top. It's literally like shaded in like a gradient. And they say it keeps your eye in the image. So as your eye is like wandering around through the image, having that dark area at the top just kind of boxes the eye in and keeps it in the image. I think that's kind of a cool idea. So you'll pick up things, as you go along. The other thing that I wanted to hit, let's see, we're out on time. We're doing pretty well on time. The other thing I wanted to hit is another basic compositional principle. And we're going to kind of do the very simple version of this and then touch on the advanced version of it. I think we'll do a whole episode on the advanced version because it is kind of complicated and relates to a lot of larger topics. But part of composition is where you're putting the focal point and how you're cutting up the picture plane. So if you have a horizon line, if you have a tree, if you have like a fence, maybe the way someone's standing, maybe a wall, maybe a doorway, how you're cutting up the picture plane. It's not just lines, it also is areas of light and dark. So anyway, if you took a, let's say, intro to photography class, if you took a basic photography class, this is an image that you would see for sure. They would show you two rectangles cut up into thirds. And in case anyone wants to know where we're going with this, you don't need to know what this means right now, but this is an approximation of the golden ratio. It's an easy way to teach people about the golden ratio without having to say golden ratio. It's an approximation of it. That's because the ratio of a third is very close to the ratio of the golden ratio, but if you have no idea what I'm talking about right now, that's totally fine. You will at the end of this, or more likely at the end of the next episode. So they would show you two rectangles like this. By the way, we call this portrait and landscape. In case anyone's totally new to image stuff, you may know that from printing, but this is portrait, this is landscape. That's just how the rectangles are laid out. They would show you something like this, and in some of them, there would be little circles here. Sometimes there wouldn't be. And they would say this is called the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds. And they teach this in photography classes, intro ones, in my opinion, because in photography, you can't get away from cutting up the picture plane. In a drawing, remember we did the drawings of the rabbits before, you can kind of just have the rabbit and then, maybe put in a little light horizon in the background. It's not so stark and intense. But when you sit outside, and let's say you have the grass, it's pretty dark, and then you have the sky, it's pretty light. No matter how you photograph this, you're going to have to cut up the picture plane in some way. So in photography, you really can't get away from it. So the rule of thirds is basically that if you are going to cut up the picture plane, if you're going to cut up the picture in some way, you don't want to do it halfway. A good place you want to cut it is along these lines of thirds. So for example, let's say we're taking a picture of a tree. I'm going to try and cut it halfway. Perfect. It'll look kind of cool because it's a drawing. You really have to imagine it's a photograph. The idea would be that this, and let's say in a photograph again, we'd have the big area of light and dark. It's even a little bit higher than halfway because I really probably can't bring myself to do it truly halfway. That is a little bit less natural feeling, a little bit less well-composed feeling. Than this. And you'll notice I put the tree over on that third line, again, naturally. So you can feel over here, I think that's true. In this image, it kind of feels like you're like, well, why is there all this extra room down here? You almost want to just come along and just cut it a little bit, right? It feels like there's a little bit too much room down here, or maybe too much room up here. Something here is just like you want to cut it a certain way. This feels a little bit more natural. You're like, oh, good, that's the right amount of ground, it's the right amount of sky, we're good to go. And again, in aesthetics, you're going to butt up against that, well, this just kind of feels right thing. It's interesting to explore. We're not going to go into the philosophy of it right now. And I've encountered that a lot. I know someone, for example, this is a really good example, who was taking a lot of pictures. He was in a lot of situations where he was out in nature, and he showed me all these pictures, and they were super epic, the ocean and the sky, and pretty much every single one, I have to kind of shade it in so we can really get the full effect. was exactly like this, halfway, boom. And that can work. It's not like, again, anything is wrong, but it just feels a little bit more normal. Perfect. If you have the horizon lower, or maybe even higher. So we took a picture, maybe the ocean's really crazy. We have all the, waves and bubbles and stuff like that, and the sky is just up here like this. Kind of feels a little bit more normal. This would be more atypical. People kind of like to have the sky because it gives you some kind of like room to breathe. This composition often does feel kind of like cramped, just saying. And I think a better illustration of that, because the horizon, you can make it work. There's some artists who, cut it halfway. You kind of want to avoid it in the beginning. But I think a better illustration of that everyone can really intuitively sense is portraits. Let's say, by the way, you can see what I'm doing right now. If you imagine drawing from corner to corner, that's a really easy way to approximate where the center of a shape is. So let's say you're drawing a portrait of someone, you never thought about aesthetics or composition or anything like that, and you say, well, okay, it's a picture of my friend, and it's a rectangle, and of course I'm a very logical person, so I'm going to put his face right in the center. That's where it should go, right? It's a picture of him, his face should go in the center. Perfect. Can you throw him down here? Cool. You can kind of feel that it's a little bit too much space up here. It almost feels like he's too low or something. You almost want to grab him and pick him up a little bit. Pretty much every classical portrait you're ever going to see, let's say we measure the thirds, 1, 2, 3, is going to have the person's head a little bit higher, up closer to the third mark, and it just feels a lot more normal. Maybe he's got a book or something again here. Just feels more normal. Comparing these two images is a perfect example. This guy feels a little bit too low. It almost feels like the artist is trying to say something by having all this negative space around him. Whereas this one, you just see it and you say, yeah, it's a picture of a guy. That's how pictures of guys look. Perfect. And in fact, if we get the circle up here, if he was a saint or something, that's a really good composition because this helps cut the image a little bit, but that's another story. And I have that a lot in my images. Sometimes I will make an image that's just a circle. I had this image, I don't think I actually did anything with this yet. It was a circle, and it was like the Garden of Eden inside the circle. So I had all these trees poking in and all this stuff in, but the point is that the whole image was just a self-contained circle. And if I go into Photoshop and I drop it dead center, it looks too low. I will sit there staring at my computer screen and I'll say, wait, is this actually the center? What? And I'll even measure, because in Photoshop you can measure, and I'll say, yeah, it's 3 inches, that's 3 inches, it's in the center. But it just feels too low. It feels more normal to have it up a little bit higher. That just feels natural. If you had this picture on your wall, it feels fine. I mean, there's a lot of negative space. Sometimes that's cool, though. But it feels like, yeah, that's where the circle should go. As opposed to this, you almost want to just take your finger and just like push it up a little bit. There's something about the human eye, I guess, where halfway feels like lower, maybe. I think it's because of the golden ratio that we're about to cover right now. But the point being that this is an approximation, again, of the rule of thirds. It just makes more sense to have the focal area up a little bit on that line of thirds. And you can use that when you're composing an image. So let's just kind of take a pause for a second. Let's say you're sketching stuff and you say, okay, I want to make a really good picture. I'm going to make a good picture and I'm going to plan it out. I'm going to plan out this picture and make sure I have a really good composition. Like Owen said, I'm going to make sure everything's well arranged. You're drawing a bowl of fruit. Okay, well, we just learned that maybe you don't want to put it straight up dead center. Okay, well, we'll put it over here, over off to the side, right? Kind of like off to the side. I guess that's an approximation of the thirds, right? We're down 2/3, we're over 2/3. Feels pretty good. Throw some fruit in here. We've got an eggplant or something, like a leaf or a banana or something. Perfect. We've got our bowl of fruit over here. Okay, and we have to have the table. It's on a table. So are we going to have it cutting halfway? No. Let's have it down 2/3. Okay, and actually, let's have the table even just going over a third, I guess. How could that be bad? Okay, perfect. We'll have, there's the edge of the table, I guess, maybe. Perfect. Okay, it's a good picture so far. Composing it, arranging it, and we learned about having the eye come in over here, so we'll just kind of leave this area open. We want to cut it up more into thirds, so now we need something going on in the background. Well, a window. I always use windows in the back of my pictures. Okay, that's about a third, and let's have it come down a little bit more so it's not cutting it halfway. Perfect, now we got this window in the background. That looks pretty good. And let's see, we have the struggle diagonal. We talked about that, right? So maybe there's like a, I don't know, dude, like a branch or something coming out of the back over here. I'm just going for the composition right now. Maybe there's like a potted plant in the back, and you can see part of its plantiness coming up over here. Okay, that looks pretty good. And reading the image, we kind of need something over here. So maybe we have like a, I don't know, man, like a coat rack. Doesn't really matter. When you're planning an image out for composition, you don't even need to know what it's going to be. So we need something over here. Who knows what this is? That looks pretty good though, composition-wise. And oh yeah, the picture ends over here, so we need something over here to kind of wrap it up. We'll take a little thing. We'll draw a little pencil over here. That's kind of cool because it's a drawing. It sort of implies, yeah, like I drew this. Cool. That looks pretty good actually. And maybe you tinker around a little bit. You say, okay, well, this is like a lot of negative space. Maybe we have like a door frame over here just to imply that we actually are like in a room. Maybe you have the wood paneling in the back. That's how we'll just kind of puncture up this negative space. That looks pretty good. And then we'll make sure we get a lot of contrast up on the fruit because that's really like the focal point. This is like the focal area. Perfect. It's pretty good composition actually. So you could take that and then say, okay, now when I do the final image, let's solve a few problems. I mean, what is this going to be? Maybe a coat rack, it's too short. Maybe it's a plant or something. Things about tone, like how dark are we going to make this? That looks pretty good actually. We'll have it be like a straight up checkerboard over here. How dark are we going to make the window? How dark are we going to do X, Y, and Z? But you can see it's pretty good composition actually. It has a nice like fine arty kind of feel to it, and it's a totally different situation than, not that this would be wrong, but let's just say, okay, I'm drawing a bowl of fruit. I'm going to put it dead center. There's nothing wrong with this. I'm not saying this is going to look bad, but you just want to make sure you're considering things and doing your decisions intentionally. Boom. We'll cut it halfway. Perfect. Perfect. Of course, I'm not really being fair because this one has a lot more going on. So let's say we need a window. The window over here. Okay. And now we got the tablecloth. And then, I don't know, struggle diagonal. So I have the plant going this way this time now. Cool. So you can just see ideas like this and how you're going to compose the image just allow you to decide what you're going to do. It's not that one is wrong and one is right. This is actually kind of cool. But again, it feels like there's a lot of empty space down here. You know, maybe if you really went all the way through with it and shaded all this in, maybe it would look cool. Maybe you handle the checkers in a certain way and there's like a really intense pattern in them and that kind of justifies it and makes it look cool. Maybe you get this far and you say, you know, yeah, actually it really does feel like there's just something missing over here. Maybe I'm going to put like I'm going to go totally wild card status over here. And I'm going to put like a little sleeping cat. My cat sleeps on the table. I'm going to put this little sleeping cat over here or something. You know, who knows? Maybe put something over here, kind of like balance it out a little bit. See, now we're getting a little bit further with it. You kind of need something over here. Something in the background maybe. Cool. Maybe it's dark. Maybe it's a night picture. Cool. So anyway, the point is that it's not like there's a right or a wrong. If I made this cat bigger, that actually would be kind of cool. Like he's like way up in the foreground. The point is that these principles allow you to think about how you're going to compose and arrange the image. It's kind of like, I like using these analogies, it's kind of like in music. Someone can teach you the rules of music, right? Which you should know if you're making music. Does that mean that you can go to like a rock concert or like a jazz club and say, oh, wow, that guy's not doing the right thing. He's not following the rules. Like, of course not. But that person is aware of the rules, and by being aware of the natural substructure of the information that they're giving to the listener, in that case here it's the viewer, they're able to make intelligent, informed decisions. And in classical images, by the way, all the time, well actually, let's see how much time we have left. Okay, we have about 10 minutes. I'm going to quickly go into the golden ratio just for a second. We're going to do a whole episode on this. I actually recorded a version of this last night, and I tried to cram in the golden ratio, and it just was way too much. It's way too much information. So I'm just going to kind of drop it in your mind. It's okay if it doesn't totally make sense, if you don't really have a full grip on it, but it's something you should just know about and be aware of as you're image making. You're not going to be sitting there like, oh my God, I have to make sure this is the golden ratio, but you should just be aware that this exists, kind of like a teaser, I guess. You can look into it on your own, but if not, we might do a whole episode on it next time. So I mentioned that the rule of thirds is an approximation of the golden ratio, and this might kind of trail off into like craziness because it's a pretty big concept, but we're just going to do it anyway for about 5 minutes or so here at the end. The golden ratio is a naturally harmonious proportion that exists, I'm going to repeat myself, naturally in the universe. Said a different way, the golden ratio is a proportional principle that naturally pervades the universe. In fact, if I had to give a definition, that's part of how I would class it. It is a proportional principle. It's a principle of ratio that is inherent to the universe. It's not man-made. It's not something that we've decided. It's not anything like that. It is inherently a principle of the universe that deals with proportion and ratio that is omnipresent, found all over, period. I had a drawing teacher once that said, it was actually pretty brave because we were in New York, honestly, and she knew everyone was not on this page, but she said, she was like, I know this is unpopular. I'm Christian, and I think the golden ratio is the fingerprint of God and throughout his creation. You can find it everywhere. And everyone's reaction was kind of negative. I mean, whatever. But I thought it was pretty cool even at the time. And I think that's true. I think that is true, actually. So anyway, what is it? So again, it's okay. This is all might make sense, might not make sense. What I mean by a ratio is that if we have a line here, of course you know what a ratio is, right? You know that something can have a 1-to-2 ratio. Kevin has 1 apple, John has 2 apples, Mike has 3 apples, Cindy has 6 apples. These apples exist in a ratio of 1-to-2, of 1-to-2, right? It's a 1-2 ratio. Other ratios, like 3-4, just kind of starting at the most basic point, you know what a ratio is. What might not be so intuitive, but it makes sense if you think about it, is these ratios can be ported over to the visual. So let's say 1-2 being the simplest example, we can cut this line so that it is a ratio of 1-to-2. So what we can say is that, let's say we cut it in half, and we could say that this is 1, this is 2. So this is a 1-2 ratio. There are other ways to do it, but I'm just going to kind of try and keep it simple right here. Or you could take a line and cut it here, and we could say this is 3, this is 4, so we cut it at that ratio. There's other ways to do it, but just don't get off track with me here, because we could really get into the wilderness, which we did last time, and it didn't work. Also, what might be less intuitive is shapes can be in that ratio. So if this is 1 inch, and this is 2 inches, probably nailed that about actually. This would be a 1-2 rectangle. Let's say if this is 3, and this is 4, we could say this is a 3-4 rectangle. So the point is that these ratios and proportions port over to the visual in a variety of ways. Something you should keep in the back of your mind. And actually, this would be familiar to people if you work with film or do something with film. I don't, but you'll often hear people say, "Oh, is this movie shot in 12:37?" No, this movie's shot in 6:14, and they're referring to the ratio that the film is shot in, that it would be projected onto the screen in. Anyway, I can already feel that we're probably going to lose our way a little bit, but it's okay. This is what the whole next episode is going to be about. But my point is that the golden ratio is, you can imagine it as, for the purpose of this, a little bit more than half. So we take halfway, it's a little bit more than half, and the actual ratio is 0.618 to 1. That is the golden ratio. It can also be written as 1 to 1.618. So don't get lost in the math. You can imagine, right? You probably know that 0.5 is half of 1. You know that 0.75 is 3/4 of 1, right? So that's half. Here we have 3/4. Sorry, I wrote a 3. I meant to write a 1. 0.5 is about half. 0.75 is 3/4. So 0.618 will be right in the middle. So that's how you can imagine it. It's a little bit more than half. And the reason this is important for us is that this is just, for some reason, it's the most aesthetically pleasing ratio. We mentioned before, it feels weird if something's halfway, but it feels good if it's a little bit up further than halfway. This is why. That's why in a picture, you want it to be bumped up a little bit. Interestingly, this is an interesting manifestation of it. So I showed you all those rectangles. If you take a bunch of people and you show them a bunch of differently proportioned rectangles, so let's say we have a 1-2 rectangle. Let's say, I'm just going to totally make this up, a 1-8 rectangle. Let's say this is a 3 to 3.5 rectangle. Let's say this is a 3-4 rectangle. And let's say this rectangle is a golden rectangle, so the ratio is 6.18 to 1. And let's say we scrub these numbers, and there's a bunch of shapes. There's a ton of them, right? And you say, pick the most aesthetically pleasing rectangle. Just pick the rectangle that you like looking at the most. Statistically, people will pick what's called a golden rectangle, where one side is the golden ratio to the other side. It just naturally feels like the correct, normal, good ratio. We'll go into why a little bit next time, but it's just something you should know because this principle is universal in art and design. Everything from, you can look at an ancient Greek building and they knew about it, and you might find that if this is 1, this is 0.618, it's cut. So if we put the whole building in a frame, it's cut at the golden ratio. It's not going to be halfway. It's not going to be 3/4. It's cut at the golden ratio. A lot of ancient art is like that. Renaissance art, a ton of it. So for example, you might find, let's say we're looking at a Da Vinci image, and pretty sure he has an Annunciation like this. There's an angel, right? And there's the wall back over here, and then we have a wall, and Mary is sitting, and she's like, wow, so great, I'll do it. She's sitting in the picture. It doesn't really matter, though. Maybe there's like a piece of concrete here, stone, marble, whatever. Kind of working on the fly here. You can take a lot of Renaissance, sorry if that was off the frame. You can take a lot of Renaissance pictures and cut them up and say, oh, look, he cut it right here at the golden ratio. He cut this right here at the golden ratio, meaning that the ratio of this to this is the golden ratio. And you can literally overlay lines and rectangles over it and see that the way things are proportioned is according to the golden ratio because it just naturally feels visually harmonious. We're not going to tie it in right now because we're totally going to get lost. But if you've seen those memes where people take, let's see how well I can just approximate this right now. Pretty good, not great. If you've seen those memes where people take the Fibonacci spiral, right, and overlay it over random stuff, like they'll find like a raccoon or something and overlay it, or a cat or something and they'll overlay it over it. This is a golden spiral. These rectangles are all golden rectangles, meaning that they're all in the golden ratio to one another. It's kind of a big topic. We're going to go into it next time. It's okay if you don't understand right now. But you should just know that that is a design principle. Said hyper simply, it just is the case that the ratio of a little bit more than half is visually pleasing. That's just how it is. In case anyone is a math person in the audience or really wants to get it, you can see, I'm going to lose it here. I shouldn't go into this, but I just can't resist. I said it was the ratio of 0.618 to 1. It can also be written as the ratio of 1 to 1.618. That's, you can see, right? So let's write that a little bit clearer. 6.618 to 1. It also is the ratio of 1 to 1.618. You can obviously see this number plus this number is this number. Meaning that, said more simply, you can say, oh, so if I take 0.618 and I want to see what the bigger number up the golden ratio is from it, it's 1. Okay. Well, if I have 1 and want to golden ratio it up, it's 1 to 1.618. So this number, the small part added to the big part, makes the next part. Said simply, I know that didn't make any sense, but I'm going to explain it right now. Let's say we're cutting it at 0.618. Boom. And this whole thing is 1. So said simply, the golden ratio, it's the only ratio where, let's say we have A and B. Okay. Ready? This is as deep as we're going to go. I have to cut myself off. If we have this line and we cut it at the golden ratio is the only ratio where the ratio, oh wait, I wrote AB. I should really write, sorry, I really should write it the other way. Just really quick, sorry. It'll make more sense if I write it the other way. If this is A and this is B, sorry. Okay, ready? The golden ratio is the only ratio where the ratio of the small part to the big part is the same as the ratio of the big part to the whole. Meaning that if we take C right here, A's ratio to B is the same ratio as B's ratio to C. Okay? And that doesn't happen with other ratios. So for example, if we just cut it in half, that doesn't happen here. A's ratio to B is not the same as B's ratio to C. B is half of C, right? But here A and B are the same. But here, the proportion is the same. The proportion of A to B, its relative size, is the same as B's relative size to C. Doesn't make sense? It's fine. It really doesn't matter. So I want to wrap this up with a little bit more of a tangible example. So I'm actually going to take my glove off. Whoa, my hand. Don't dox me, bro. This is the last thing we're going to do. We just have a few more minutes. So I wanted to make that illustration of the golden ratio not so crazy. We're going to do a whole episode on this next time, so it doesn't really matter. But just so you can see it in application, this is a golden ratio caliper. It's a pretty rare tool, actually. I had to order it from somewhere in South America. Mine's way too big. I could zoom out a little bit, but it's the end of the episode, so I'm not going to. But just so you can see here, just to give you an idea of what we've been talking about, this proportion is always the same. That's why you have a caliper. It stays the same. This one's a little bit too big, so when it gets too small, it starts to be inaccurate just because of the limitations of the materials. But if we were working on a big picture, perfect. The ratio is the same. This is designed so that this middle point is always cutting this larger distance in the golden ratio. And it's kind of cool to have one of these because you can find the golden ratio on your body. So for example, on your fingers, your finger is cut. There we go. Perfect. I'm not forcing this, by the way. This is just how it is. Your finger is cut so that the top digit is the golden ratio from the bottom of the finger to the top. It's cut at the golden ratio. Your hand is the same way. Let's see how much I can fit on screen right now. I really should zoom out, but I'm not going to. Your hand is the same way. Let's do it up here. Perfect. You can cut your wrist. Look at my thumb out of the way. Perfect. So the palm of your hand is cut so that your fingers are the golden ratio to the palm. You see what I'm saying? Because they're the same ratio. The top of your finger is cut in the same way that your hand is. Perfect. And I'll draw that really quickly. So if you have your finger, it's a really good finger, dude. Right? And you have your top digit. This ratio is the same ratio as if you have your hand. Perfect. Should make it a little bit longer. it's the same proportion. Does that make sense? And you can find that proportion all over your body. It's just basically naturally encoded into nature. But all that means for you, let's wrap this up right now. All that means for you is you want to keep in mind that it just naturally is visually harmonious to cut things a little bit less than half or a little bit more than half. So if I'm doing a picture, it's not like I'm sitting there thinking, oh, I have to use the golden ratio. But like I said, if I'm drawing a portrait of someone, I will put their head up a little bit more than halfway, because that's just naturally the pleasing design principle. I'll try and make my rectangles in the golden rectangle, in the golden ratio. Probably shouldn't have gone into this because it's too complicated, but we're going to cover that next episode. But I just wanted to drop that in your hat. So just to recap, what did we cover this time? We covered, boom, how your eye reads an image. 1, 2, 3, 4. That means this is the end of the image. That means your eye enters here. That's basically it. And that means we have a natural diagonal here as opposed to the struggle diagonal. We talked about the rule of thirds, how in a photography class they'll teach you to cut up the picture plane into thirds. And just to wrap it up, that rule of thirds, what's a third? It's 0.6666 repeating. Don't read into that. That rule of thirds is an approximation of the golden ratio. What they're telling you when they say it's pleasing to cut the picture plane into thirds, and that you should do that instead of halfway. We talked about halfway feeling kind of imbalanced and static. What they're basically saying is they're telling you to approximate the golden ratio. That this ratio of a little bit more than half is what is naturally visually pleasing. And we covered that with the example of the guy's head who's halfway, feeling too low, and what really actually feels good if is he himself is cutting the picture at the golden ratio. That feels way more normal. We can imagine that being insane. It's still probably a little bit too low, but it's okay. So we covered the principle. All you need to remember is that slightly more than half is the most pleasing visual ratio. So you can take that if you're planning on watching the rest of the show. You were like, oh my God, I needed a 3-hour episode. You can take some of that stuff and get to drawing. You got the sketchbook last week, right? You're doing your homework. The show has homework now. I watch the show to relax. Anyway, next week, this was kind of a teaser. Next week, we'll do the golden ratio. Assuming, I don't know if I'm going to be live or not. I probably will be, but if I'm not, let's say the next pre-recorded episode, we'll go really hard into the golden ratio because that proportion basically affects a ton of different things and plays out mathematically and all that stuff. But I don't want to get lost in the weeds right now. So we'll cover that next time. And that is the 45-minute or so, maybe a little bit longer, intro to basic compositional things you can take away with you. We did it. We made it all the way to the end. Here we are at the end of the episode. Thanks for watching. Let me know how it's going if you're drawing stuff. And I think this is kind of cool. Maybe we'll see how far we can go into intro to drawing. And I'll catch you guys later.